Well, at this point, what we're going to do is move on to the stage of development where we're going to set up each individual section of our movie. Now, as we already know, our whole entire website is designed to be modular or compartmental. So with this compartmental style of architecture, we were able to separate each individual section into its own SWF. As we've just seen, we can apply CSS to the text that's in the Killer Sites SWF. Well, after applying that to all the other SWFs, we can now proceed to the point where we want to enact some of the interactivity into these buttons. So, for example, when I press Control-Enter in your master file right now, we do see the CSS, which we've just applied to the Killer Sites default loaded file. However, you'll notice that the buttons cannot allow us to load the other files. So what we're going to do is try to enable some interactivity here. I have a completed version which is also provided for you to look at and to examine as you're learning and developing this website. And notice how we want it to act. You'll note that each individual button has sort of a rollover effect to it where it gets orange and it becomes bold, in keeping with the colors that I have here. But the Killer Sites section is indicated not merely by the fact that we have a title which is loaded here and the text, but also the fact that the button is disabled. Notice these act like buttons. They turn into the fingers. Here we just have a normal arrow that we would normally have, and if I click it, nothing happens. It's a great way to proceed in web design, especially from a usability standpoint, because here there are a number of indicators telling the audience what page they're on. Here, here, as well as the text here. When you go to the author section, here, this text, and the fact that this is disabled, whereas the other ones still are enabled. So that's ultimately what we want our file to look like. So at this point, we're going to proceed. I'm going to commence by adding something which we haven't seen yet. So here's our master file, and as we well remember, our actions are on the first layer, on the Actionscript layer, first frame, and we will see the movie clip loader, start MCL and MCL. We loaded the Killer Sites SWF by default. We're going to be changing this. Well, we can leave that there for now, but we'll change a few other things. Here, you'll note start load var, end load var. Alright, well, we're also going to add some button interactivity in this as we go along. And we'll get to that in a second. But first and foremost, what I'm going to do is introduce a new layer. And this one I'm going to call Anchors. And in the Anchors layer, I'm going to introduce to you a new concept. So here, I'm going to ask you to stretch out the text. Let's go to about frame 50, and if you click and drag and then press F5, we've stretched out all this text all the way out to where we are here. However, I also want you to click and drag at frame 10, press F6 to create a new keyframe, frame 20, F6, frame 30, F6, and frame 40, F6. Now you'll see a bunch of new keyframes here for us to be using. Alright, now here's what I want to do. The anchor layer is where we're going to indicate what section of the movie we are at. Now, again, we're not using this in the traditional way where we would load everything at frame 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 all in one SWF. No, we're working from a modular system, a compartmental style. So, what that means is, while we are going to get to section 10, there's no content here that's physically on this page. We're going to load the content externally. Of course, we know the advantages of that, primarily speed and weight. So what we are going to do at this point is call upon those elements and style our text the way we intend. But the biggest reason that I'm setting this up in this fashion, I could still have done all of that just on one frame. However, the reason I'm doing it in this fashion is because we can take advantage of the anchors. And what that is, as I'll show you in just a second, is a different type of label that we can associate with this frame. For example, here if it says the frame number 10 would be the killer sites section, I can write inside the property window, killer sites is this section's name, and instead of label type name, which would just give me a regular label, a little flag, I'm going to take this and say comment instead. And well, as you can see, a comment is a comment, but that doesn't really help us here because that's just a little way of telling us a little note to ourselves or to anybody else who's looking at this. It's only developers who will see this. So instead of comment, we're going to choose the last option, anchor. And you can see now there's a little anchor icon here. What that allows us to do is to take advantage of the back button inside of the browser window, which will host our Flash website. This is oftentimes a disservice to Flash, is the fact that the back button never used to work with Flash. It wouldn't remember the pages that you were on. It would always go back to the beginning of your movie. However, if we do it with the anchors, we can take advantage of the back button, because when we publish our Flash file, as we'll do at the very end, we will also include named anchors, allowing JavaScript to interact with Flash and take advantage of the browser's back button. This is a big advantage and helps to make your Flash movie a lot more usable and friendly. So, continuing in this fashion, I will name this particular frame the author anchor. As well, I have a portfolio anchor. There's the portfolio anchor. And finally, I have the contact anchor. Last thing, let's just put in a little comment section, because you can do that as well. So notice here I can write a little comment that says, oh, this is where we'll be loading information. Whoops. And notice that'll be a comment. And at this point I can say F6 and I can leave another comment here. I could say anchors are used to take advantage of the back button, which of course, as I just explained, is found in the browser window. So there you go. Now all of these can be done on one frame. Obviously we could have had 5 frames here or something like that, but I stretched them out so that we'll be able to read not only the anchor names but also any comments that we have here, and that doesn't add any weight or do anything detrimental to your movie. So at this point we've set up the basic architecture. I'm going to Control S to save this file, and now one other thing. We definitely need to open up the action scripting window and put stop actions on each one of these frames as well, because of course we will need to stop at each one of these individual sections. So now that that's done, we've got our structure for the master file ready. I'm going to save the file. You can press Control Enter. It's not really going to do anything at this point, obviously, but now what we have to do is start to implement the button activities, and we'll do that by introducing the concept of text formatting.